My name is Lydia Hayes, a 28-year-old data entry clerk who's carved out a small, quiet life in the crumbling husk of Hawthorne Towers, a forgotten apartment complex on the edge of Chicago's outskirts. I'm not one for chaos. I'd rather heat up a frozen dinner and lose myself in sitcom reruns than face the world outside, and this place, with its peeling walls and flickering lights, suits me just fine. I've been here 2 years, cocooned in routine, the hum of thin walls, neighbors arguing, footsteps echoing, keeping me company without ever needing to say hello. But 3 nights ago, the power died and everyone vanished, leaving me alone in a building that's no longer just a building. Now I'm standing in my apartment, clutching a tarnished key that cuts my palm. Black ooze dripping from the wound, whispering my name in a voice that's mine but twisted, while the walls pulse with faces, eyeless, screaming, and my reflection in the mirror shows a throat torn open, blood flowing up into empty sockets, a shadow behind me grinning with teeth I can't see. It was late, past midnight, the air thick and suffocating when I stood trembling in the ruins of my living room, the key burning cold in my hand, its jagged edge slicing deeper with every breath. The walls shuddered, black ooze seeping from cracks, pooling on the floor, forming tendrils that curled toward me, wet and alive, stinking of rot and metal. My flashlight flickered, the beam catching the faces, dozens, pressed into the plaster, their mouths gaping, eyeless sockets weeping black, their silent screams vibrating in my skull. My legs shook, my stomach churning, bile rising as I backed into the corner, the ooze lapping at my bare feet, burning my skin, my toes curling as it burrowed in, cold and sharp. The mirror across the room flickered, my reflection twisting, my face gone, just a bloody gash where my throat should be, black blood streaming up, pooling in hollow eyes, and behind me, a shadow, tall, thin, no face, its hands long and dripping, tendrils wriggling from the tips, reaching for me. I screamed, my voice raw, cracking, the key humming louder, Lydia, Lydia, and I knew I'd never escape, not from this, not from what I'd let in. It started 3 nights back, a muggy August evening, the kind where sweat sticks to your skin and the air buzzes with restless heat. I was sprawled on my couch in 4C, scrolling through my phone, the blue glow lighting my cramped apartment, faded wallpaper curling at the edges, a sagging bookshelf stuffed with paperbacks, a coffee table scarred from years of neglect. The lights flickered once, twice, a hiccup I'd grown used to in this old pile of bricks, usually just a storm or some drunk tripping the breaker downstairs. But this time, they didn't come back, just died, plunging me into dark, the hum of my fridge cutting off mid-breath, the TV blinking out with a laugh track stuck in its throat. I sat up, my heart thudding, a prickle of unease crawling up my neck as I waited, expecting the usual buzz of power snapping back. Nothing, just silence, thick, heavy, pressing down like a damp cloth over my face. The air turning cold, my breath fogging in front of me though it was summer. I stood, my bare feet sticking to the linoleum, the chill seeping into my soles, and grabbed my phone, switching on the flashlight, the beam shaky as it swept the room, shadows stretching too long, bending wrong, the air sour with a damp, rotting stink I couldn't place. My chest tightened, my hands trembling as I shuffled to the window, peering out from the 4th floor. The street below was swallowed in black. No streetlights, no cars, just an endless void, the city's distant glow gone. But the building, it was dead. No stomping from the single mom in 4A. No muffled chatter from Evelyn Carver in 3D. No bass thumping from Jake Torres across the hall. I frowned, my stomach twisting, my breath shallow as I cracked my door, shining the light down the narrow hall. Empty. The flickering overheads dark. The air thick, heavy, the sour smell stronger now, like meat left to fester. "Hello?" I called, my voice small, trembling, echoing back unanswered. And that's when it hit me. No one was here, not a creak, not a whisper, just a silence that felt alive, breathing, watching. I tried the breaker box in my kitchen, my fingers fumbling with the switches, each click loud in the quiet, my breath hitching as nothing happened, the sour stink wafting up from the floorboards, sharp and wet, stinging my nose. I grabbed my phone again. No signal, no Wi-Fi, just a blank screen. My text to Kate stuck unsent, my pulse quickening, panic clawing at my chest. I went back to the window, peering down. The street wasn't empty anymore. Shadows streamed out, fast but silent, dragging suitcases, clutching bags, no talking, no shouting, just moving. Evelyn with her cane, Jake with his duffel, the mom yanking her kid along, all vanishing into the dark, no glances back, no noise, just gone. My throat tightened, my fingers gripping the sill, my heart racing. Should I go? But the dark outside pulsed, thick and hungry, and I stumbled back, locking my door, bolting it tight, my hands shaking as I sank to the couch, whispering to myself, just wait till morning, my voice trembling, the silence swallowing it whole. The hours dragged, the silence turning wrong, not city quiet, not even night quiet, but a void, suffocating, unnatural, pressing against my ears like water. I paced, my flashlight beam jittering, my shadow stretching too far, curling up the walls where it shouldn't. Then the tapping started, soft, faint like fingernails dragging on wood, drifting from the walls, circling me slow, deliberate. I froze, my breath catching, my skin prickling as I swung the light. Nothing, just peeling paint and shadows, but the tapping moved under the floor now, scraping like claws, then above, creaking heavy, like footsteps on a ceiling that shouldn't hold anyone. I'm on the top floor. My stomach twisted, my hands trembling, sweat beading cold on my neck as I cracked my door again. The hall was empty, but the air was thicker, colder, the sour smell choking me, a faint giggle echoing, high and guttural, bubbling up from the walls, my blood icing over as it grew closer, right behind me. I slammed the door, locked it, my hands fumbling with the bolts, my pulse pounding as I shoved the couch against it, my breath ragged, my flashlight shaking in my grip. No kids lived here, not that young, and the sound wasn't right, too wet, too deep, like a throat full of water laughing through mud. I grabbed my laptop. The building's security cams ran on backup, a glitchy system I'd hacked once out of boredom. The feed flickered on, grainy black and white, empty halls, the lobby, the basement. But then I saw them, the people leaving earlier, jerky, like broken film, their arms too long, skipping frames, unnatural, wrong. My throat closed, my fingers trembling over the keys, and then I caught it. Shadows, tall, thin, no faces, standing still in the corners, hands stretched, tendrils, wriggling from their fingers, eyes hollow, black, watching the cameras, watching me. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest heaving, my hands shaking, the tapping louder now, pounding, the giggle turning to a growl, echoing from the walls, under my feet, inside my skull. A thud hit the door, sharp, heavy, sending my heart into my throat. I froze, clutching the flashlight, my voice trembling as I choked out, "Who's there?" The thud stopped, silence stretching, my breath fogging the air as I crept to the peephole. Nothing, just dark, but the shadows in the hall twisted, stretching long, tendrils curling toward my door, black and wet. I stumbled back, my chest tight, sinking into the corner, the beam flickering as the tapping came back. Everywhere, walls, floor, ceiling pounding now, shaking the room, the floor tilting under me, pulling me down. My light hit the wall, faces, dozens, pressed into the plaster, eyeless, mouths gaping, black ooze dripping from their sockets, their silent screams vibrating in my bones, stretching the paint, clawing through. The flashlight died, dark swallowing me, the pounding a roar, and I curled tight, my scream stuck, my mind fracturing. I'm not alone, I'm not alone. The dark pressed in, thick and cold, swallowing me whole as I curled tighter in the corner, my flashlight dead in my hand. The pounding a relentless roar shaking the walls, the floor, my bones. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, fogging the freezing air, my chest tight with panic, my fingers clawing at my knees, slick with sweat and something else, black, wet, oozing from my palms where I'd gripped the key too hard, burning my skin, stinging sharp like acid. The faces in the walls pulsed, their eyeless sockets dripping ooze that pooled on the floor, tendrils curling toward me, brushing my bare feet, cold and slimy, burrowing into my skin, twisting under my toes. I choked on a scream, my throat raw, my stomach heaving as the giggle came again. High, guttural, bubbling up from everywhere, the walls, the ceiling, inside my skull. A sound like drowning children laughing through mud. My hands shook, my heart slamming against my ribs, terror flooding me hot and cold, guilt clawing at my gut. Why didn't I leave? Why didn't I run? The pounding stopped. Sudden, sharp, the silence slamming back heavier, thicker, a weight that crushed my chest, my ears ringing with the absence. I held my breath, trembling, the ooze lapping at my ankles now, burning deeper, my skin blistering, my toes curling as it spread, cold and alive, whispering, "Lydia," soft, wet. My own voice twisted back at me, mocking. The lights flickered on, dim, buzzing, casting a sickly yellow glow, and I saw it, the key, lying on the floor where I'd dropped it, tarnished and cold, its jagged edge glinting, vibrating faintly, humming my name in a low, insistent drone that drilled into my head. I scrambled back, my hands slipping in the ooze, my breath hitching as I stared. The tendrils from the walls reached for it, curling around it, lifting it slow, deliberate, like it was theirs, like it belonged. My stomach dropped, my skin prickling, a cold sweat beading on my neck as the key floated, turning toward me, its hum growing louder. Lydia, open it. And I knew deep in my gut it wasn't just a key, it was something worse, something alive. I stumbled to my feet, my legs shaking, the ooze clinging to my ankles, burning up my calves, my skin bubbling where it touched, red and raw. I grabbed my flashlight, fumbling with the switch. Nothing, dead, useless, and threw it aside, my hands trembling as I backed toward the door, the couch still jammed against it, the bolts locked tight. The giggle turned to a growl, low and wet, rumbling from the walls. And then a thud, sharp, heavy, hit the ceiling above. Dust falling in slow spirals, the plaster cracking, black ooze seeping through, dripping onto my hair, my shoulders cold and thick, stinking of rot and blood. I gagged, my stomach heaving, my hands swiping at it, smearing it across my face, burning my lips, my tongue tasting metal and decay as I choked, my eyes watering, panic clawing my chest. I had to get out, had to find someone, anyone. I shoved the couch aside, my arms trembling, my breath ragged. The ooze pooling faster now, lapping at my knees. Tendrils curling up my legs, tugging me down. I fumbled with the bolts, my fingers slipping, black and slick. The keys hum louder, insistent. Lydia, stay! And the door flew open, slamming against the wall. The hall beyond dark, endless, the sour smell choking me, a faint rictus hiss echoing from the shadows. I stumbled out, my bare feet slipping in the ooze, my hands clawing the walls for balance. The plaster soft, wet, pulsing under my fingers, faces pushing through, eyeless, gaping, their mouths stretching wide, black tongues lolling, dripping ooze that splattered my arms, burning my skin. I screamed, my voice raw, echoing down the hall, the growl answering, louder, closer, the floor tilting, pulling me toward the stairs. I ran, my legs burning, my breath short, the stairs twisting under me, rungs bending, mawing open like mouths, blackly curling up, snagging my ankles, cutting deep, blood mixing with ooze, my skin tearing as I kicked free. The walls stretched, longer, narrower, the ceiling dropping low, brushing my head, ooze dripping into my hair, my eyes blinding me, burning hot and cold. I stumbled down the stairwell, looping, endless, my hands clawing the railing, slick with black, my fingers blistering, my chest heaving as the hiss grew. Sharp, wet, a chorus of voices, young and old, whispering my name, Lydia, Lydia, from everywhere, nowhere inside me. I hit the third floor, my knees buckling, the hall stretching out, doors gaping open, ooze pouring from them, faces screaming silent, their tongues reaching, brushing my legs, cold and slimy, pulling me back. Mrs. Evelyn Carver's door hung ajar, freed, her cane lying in a puddle of ooze, black and thick, stinking of death. I staggered in, my breath ragged, my heart pounding, terror choking me. Evelyn knew things, always muttering about the building, the fire, the ones who didn't leave. Evelyn? I croaked, my voice trembling, the room dark, the air freezing, my flashlight beam flickering weak as I swept it. Her couch, her knitting, a mug of tea steaming on the table, impossible in the cold, the steam curling up, black, alive, tendrils wriggling in it. Then I saw her, slumped in her chair, her face peeling back, skin splitting like paper, revealing bone beneath, yellow and cracked, her eyes gone. Just black holes weeping ooze, her mouth gaping, a tongue, long, black, slimy, lolling out, dripping onto her lap. I screamed, my stomach heaving, bile burning my throat as she twitched, her head snapping up, her voice a rasp. There in the crawl space, Lydia, the ones who burned, the ones who stayed. And then the ooze surged, pouring from her mouth, her eyes, wrapping her like a shroud, pulling her down, under the floor, her scream gurgling wet as she vanished, black blood splattering my face, burning my cheeks. I bolted, my legs trembling, my hands shaking, the ooze chasing me, tendrils curling up the walls, the ceiling, the growl louder now, shaking the hall. I hit the stairwell again, my breath short, my skin raw, that is snagging my legs, cutting deeper, blood dripping, mixing with ooze, my toes curling as it burrowed in, cold and sharp, my screams echoing, swallowed by the hiss. I stumbled into the lobby, my chest heaving, the message board looming, covered in notes, scribbled in panic, leave now, it's coming, don't stay, and one in my handwriting, wet with blood, don't take the key. My stomach dropped, my hands trembling, my eyes darting. The key was in my pocket. Cold, buzzing, cutting my fingers as I pulled it out, ooze dripping from the wound, whispering, open it, Lydia. And the floor cracked, ooze pouring up, tendrils curling toward me, faces forming, eyeless, screaming, reaching for my legs. Jake Torres burst in, maintenance guy, broad and gruff, his flashlight beam wild, his voice sharp. Lydia, what the hell's going on? He grabbed my arm, his grip tight, his eyes wide, darting to the ooze, the faces, the key in my hand. We gotta get to the basement. Crawl space. Something's down there. I nodded, my throat tight, tears streaming, relief flooding me. He was real. He was here. But the growl answered, loud, wet, shaking the lobby, the walls pulsing, ooze surging, tendrils snagging his legs, cutting deep, blood spurting as he screamed, his flashlight clattering, his hands clawing at me. Run! Run! He yelled, his voice breaking, and then the tendrils yanked hard, his head cracking open, splitting wide, black ooze pouring out, his body melting, flesh sloughing off in wet clumps, bones snapping, turning to bunsong before my eyes, pooling on the floor, tendrils wriggling, reaching for me. I ran, my scream raw, my legs burning, the key humming, Lydia, stay, the ooze chasing, the lobby twisting, the door slamming shut. I stumbled back from the lobby, my legs trembling, my breath ragged, the ooze surging after me, black tendrils curling across the floor, wriggling like worms, stinking of rot and blood. The puddle that used to be Jake Torres bubbling, his melted flesh seeping into the cracks, his scream still echoing in my skull. My hands shook, slick with black, the key burning cold in my fist, cutting deeper, ooze dripping from my palm, whispering, Lydia, stay, in a voice that twisted my own, low and wet, drilling into my head. The walls pulsed, faces pressing through, eyeless, gaping black tongues lolling, dripping ooze that splattered my arms, burning my skin, my chest heaving as I ran, my bare feet slipping in the muck, the building growling, alive, the air freezing, my breath fogging in sharp, panicked puffs. I hit the stairs, my knees buckling, the ridden snagging my ankles, cutting deep, blood mixing with ooze, my skin tearing as I kicked free, my scream raw, swallowed by the hiss. Louder now, a chorus of voices, young and old, growling my name from everywhere, nowhere inside me. The stairwell twisted, rungs bending, mawing open like mouths, ooze pouring from the gaps, tendrils curling up, wrapping my legs, burning through my jeans, my flesh blistering red and raw, my toes curling as it burrowed in, cold and sharp. I clawed the railing, my hands slipping, black and slick, my fingers bubbling where the ooze touched, my chest tight with panic. Terror choking me as I stumbled up or down, I couldn't tell. The stairs looping endless, the walls stretching long and narrow, the ceiling dropping low, brushing my head, ooze dripping into my hair, my eyes blinding me, burning hot and cold. I hit the basement door, my hands trembling, the key humming louder. Open it, Lydia, and I shoved it open, my breath short, my stomach heaving, the sour stink overwhelming, a wet Richter's hiss echoing from the dark. The basement was a tomb, cold, damp, the air thick with rot, the walls slick with ooze, pulsing like flesh, black veins branching out, twitching, alive. My flashlight flickered weak, the beam catching bones, small, cracked, scattered across the floor, tangled in clumps of hair, wet and matted, stinking of death. I gagged, bile burning my throat, my legs trembling as I stepped in, the ooze lapping at my ankles, tendrils curling up my calves, burning deeper, my skin peeling, my breath hitching as the hiss grew, sharp, wet, a growl bubbling up from the crawl space, a black hole in the corner, yawning wide, dripping ooze that pooled and writhed, faces forming, eyeless, screaming, reaching for me. My heart slammed, my hands shaking, the key cutting my palm, blood dripping, mixing with ooze, whispering, Lydia, come. And I froze, terror flooding me, hot and cold, my chest tight with a scream I couldn't let out. Evelyn Carver's voice rasped from the dark. Lydia, don't. Broken, wet, echoing from the crawl space, her cane clattering as ooze surged, tendrils wrapping it, pulling it down. I swung the light. Her face, or what was left, pressed from the wall, skin peeling back, bone yellow and cracked, her eyes gone, black holes weeping ooze, her mouth gaping, a tongue, long, black, slimy, lolling out, dripping onto the floor. They burned, never left, took us, she gurgled, her voice choking as ooze poured from her throat, her body splitting, flesh sloughing off in wet clumps, bones snapping, melting into boonsong, tendrils wriggling, reaching for me. I screamed, my stomach heaving, my hands trembling as I backed away, the ooze chasing, the growl louder, shaking the basement, the faces in the walls stretching, their tongues brushing my legs, cold and wet, pulling me down. Jake Torres stumbled in, his flashlight wild, his voice sharp, panicked. Lydia, get out! He grabbed my arm, his grip tight, his eyes wide, darting to the ooze, the faces, the key in my hand. Crawl space, bones, something's alive down there. I nodded, my throat tight, tears streaming, relief flooding me. He was here, real, but the growl roared, the walls shaking, ooze surging, tendrils snagging his legs, cutting deep, blood spurting as he screamed, his flashlight clattering, his hands clawing at me. Run, run! He yelled, his voice breaking, and then the tendrils yanked, hard, his head splitting open, cracking wide, black ooze pouring out, his eyes bulging, melting, flesh sloughing off in wet clumps, bones snapping, turning to boonsong before my eyes, tendrils wriggling, reaching for me. I ran, my scream raw, my legs burning, the key humming. Lydia, stay! The ooze chasing, the basement twisting, the door slamming shut behind me. I hit the lobby, my chest heaving, the message board looming, covered in notes. Leave now. It's coming. Don't take the key. And one in my handwriting, wet with blood. It's in your bones. My stomach dropped, my hands trembling, the key cutting deeper, ooze dripping from my palm, whispering, Lydia, open. And the floor cracked, ooze pouring up, tendrils curling toward me, faces forming, eyeless, screaming, reaching for my legs. I bolted for the front doors, my hands shaking, my breath short, shoving them open. Dark, endless, the street gone, just a void. And then I was back, lobby message board staring, the doors slamming shut, the key humming louder. Lydia, home! My scream echoing, swallowed by the growl, the ooze surging, tendrils wrapping my legs, pulling me down. I ran stairs, halls, doors, every exit looping me back, the building twisting, walls mowing open, ooze pouring, faces screaming, tongues reaching, the key cutting my hand, blood dripping, mixing with ooze, my skin blistering, tendrils curling up my arms, burning deep, my flesh bubbling, my breath hitching as the growl grew, louder, closer, under my feet, in my skull. I hit my apartment, slamming the door, shoving the couch against it, my hands trembling, black and slick, my fingers peeling, ooze dripping from my nails, whispering, Lydia, stay. And the walls pulsed, faces stretching, tongues lolling, the mirror showing me. No face, throat torn, blood flowing up, eyes hollow, tendrils wriggling from my sockets, a shadow behind grinning, teeth black and sharp, reaching for me. I fled. Motel. 2 hours away, my hands trembling on the wheel, the key in my pocket buzzing, cutting through my jeans, ooze dripping onto the seat, whispering, Lydia. Home, my breath short, my chest tight, terror choking me as I checked in, the clerk's eyes darting, wary, his voice low. You from Hawthorne? I nodded, my throat dry, and he backed away, his hands shaking. Get out, now. I locked the room, my hands trembling, the mirror showing me, skin peeling, tendrils curling from my arms, my eyes hollow, blood flowing up, the shadow grinning, teeth glinting, whispering, Lydia, stay. And the key cut deeper, ooze pouring from my hand, pooling on the floor, tendrils reaching for my legs. Officer Mia Reynolds came the next day, called by the motel, her badge glinting, her voice sharp. You're Lydia Hayes? Hawthorne's a ghost town, everyone's gone. I stammered, my hands trembling, ooze dripping. Something's there, in the crawl space, bones, faces. She frowned, her eyes narrowing. We found a key, rusted, carved with symbols, bones 2 kids, eyes still moving. My stomach dropped, my breath hitching, the key in my pocket buzzing. Lydia, home. And Mia stepped back, her hand on her gun, her voice low. You're bleeding, black. What the hell? The ooze surged, tendrils curling from my hand, reaching for her, and she screamed, bolting, her voice fading. Stay away! The door slamming, the key humming louder, my skin peeling, tendrils curling up my arms, my chest, my eyes burning, hollowing out. I went back, drove blind, the key pulling me, cutting deeper, ooze dripping, whispering, Lydia, home. The building dark, quiet, the lobby pulsing, ooze covering the walls, faces screaming, tendrils curling, a chorus of voices. Welcome back, wet and low, the crawl space yawning wide, black and alive, pulling me in, ooze wrapping me, a kenden forming, my skin peeling, tendrils curling from my eyes, my throat, my chest, the key sinking into my ribs, buzzing, Lydia, us, and I sank, my scream gurgling, swallowed by the dark. I got out, woke outside, alive, my skin scarred, ooze dripping slow, tendrils curling under my flesh, my eyes hollow, the key in my chest, humming soft, a whisper, Lydia, stay. But he's trapped, the faceless one, clawing under Hawthorne, hungry, screaming in silence, never full, never free. I learned, don't linger where the dark breathes, don't touch its secrets, or it'll eat you from within. If you're out there, tell me, what would you do when the shadows know your name? Run when the key cuts, or stay like I did? Drop it below. I need to know I'm not alone because he's still here in me and I feel him every night.